Right, it is Thursday, April 4th. We are at the beginning of chapter 7 of the book of Ezra. And it starts, there's a new beginning here. There's a break with what came before. Remember that the temple was actually completed last week in chapter 6. Passover was celebrated. And all that was said in the previous session. But chapter 7 starts, V'chara dvarim ha'eleh, right, which is a great literary device. After these things, appears a couple of other places of great significance in the Tanakh. Who wants to read? Go. You can have the good names.
And after these things, in the reign of Artaxerxes, king of Persia, Ezra, the son of Seraiah, the son of Azariah, the son of Hilkiah, the son of Shallum, the son of Zadok, the son of Ahitub, the son of Amariah, the son of Azariah, the son of Meriot, the son of Zerahiah, the son of Uzi, the son of Buki, the son of Abishua, the son of Phineas or Pinchas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aharon.
That's interesting, by the way. Oh, okay. So our introduction is now to Ezra, taking us until we are, 6/10 finished with the book that bears his name, to get to the title character. And the first thing that we're given is a complete pedigree that takes him back to Aaron the high priest. Right? So that's the first thing we learn. Not bad. This issue of genealogy is there aren't all that many places outside of the great exception, the Book of Chronicles, Divrei Yamim, where we get long genealogies. We get who people's parents are. That's not uncommon at all. So there's a concern about genealogy, but this idea of pedigree, that his family line going back to his father and his father and his father and his father, is a later, I don't know if one wants to think of it as a literary development or as a real concern. That is, they're concerned to show that Ezra coming back is of the lineage of Kohen Hagadol. But we'll learn something out about Ezra in a minute if you want to keep reading.
This Ezra went up from Babylon, and he was a scribe skilled in the Torah of Moses, which the Lord God of Israel had given, and the king granted him all that he asked for the hand of the Lord his God was upon him.
Okay.
And
you're in a different translation.
Yeah, I'm in a different translation.
Okay. So, no, I don't care. But it just makes it hard for me to know when you finish the verse.
Oh.
It's okay.
I stopped.
So what else do we learn about Ezra?
He's a descendant of Aaron.
So he's a son of Aaron, he's a scribe.
A skilled scribe. Sofer Mahir, I love that. Not just Sofer.
He's talented.
Sofer Mahir.
Yep.
And he came up from Babylon.
He's of the returnees.
Yeah, but it probably means Sofer Mahir. I don't think that they're talking about the speed with which he writes, but they're talking about the fact that he's very skilled and fluent.
Okay, that makes sense.
I think that's what they refer to even in Hebrew. Sofer Mahir b'Torat Moshe.
And he's a scribe b'Torat Moshe asher natan Adonai Elohei Israel. Right? He is specifically a skilled scribe in the Torah of Moses that God gave. Now it's fun because one of the things we said in chapter 6 is the events all happen according to Kichtav Sifar Moshe, as it's written in the book of Moses. We had Torah earlier. Chapter 6 we have the book of Moses. Excuse me. And now we have the Torah of Moses. So it's nice. It becomes the full expression.
JPS described it as expert in teaching of Moses. Which one are you reading that's skilled?
Skilled in the Torah level.
Is that the art scroll or is that your phone?
Oh,
This is an iPhone.
Okay.
you
can tell which one
No,
is-
I can go back and find out what it is.
No, that's okay. So skilled,
It has
expert,
Hebrew right next to it.
סופר מהיר. אשר ירוץ הקורא בו, that's the חבקוק.
And the word, the range of meanings of Samach Peresh, right? So we have it right here as we say scribe, and we understand very clearly what we mean by scribe, right? That's somebody a copyist, as opposed to an author. But from the same.
But scribes took on different roles then.
But
Well, again,
he
let's not.
was an expert, however.
I don't want to project. I don't mind looking at parallels, but I don't want us to say what we know to be true, unless we can point to why we know it to be true. So, for example, Sofer is related to Sefer, right? So, it's words. That's why I like the word scripture. So you get a better sense of a scribe, and we don't in English. The verb to scribe something having to do with writing is pretty rare. We know what a scribe is, but the root. But scribbling is not something that we do inscribe. There are places where it comes up. There are some. Good. And and I don't know if it's biblically attested. We could check. I'm so lost. One can use it as a verb to tell a story, right?
לספר.
לספר. Thank you. I kept coming up Sipur. Correct. But לספר. Which is funny because Sipur makes it seem like it should be lispor.
It's the same
Right.
shoresh and somehow the relationship, I don't know, I
calendar.
haven't thought about it, lispor. But biblically, they mostly limnot. They mostly use mana, mene, whatever.
Right.
But
To count.
limnot to count, and lesaper is the telling off.
Right. And so the words around the verbs around the Torah story. I've been fascinated for a while that people are korei batorah, which we say to read, but it has a clear sense of reading out loud. That is, you call it.
Likro in Hebrew is to read or to call.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when I say read in English, my first assumption is the quiet experience. I don't know if that's valid, but my first connection is, whereas the verb likro, clearly its first association. In modern Hebrew, you can do this too. But biblically, it is a Yom Truah Mikra'e Kodesh, right? A day of holy convocation, which is great English and nobody knows what it means, but it means not to invoke, but to convoke. I don't know what that means. But it's a day of shouting, right? Mikra'e Kodesh is a day of shouting holiness, which is funky. But that's what calling is.
There are connections between
Convocation, isn't it? People all together.
No, I think convocation, to invoke, is to vocalize.
Well, so I think convoke is
To call together. Right, no, but the important thing it's not to congregate, which is to get together. To convocate is to call together. It's Mel's introduction to the Baruch Hu every Shabbos morning, the Shachrit. We now turn the page, and I remember what page it is, for the Baruch Hu, the call to worship. Right? So that's what a convocate is, to call,
But the connection between numbers and telling goes across languages too, because the word tally in English. And tell. And
nice.
In fact, if you look at Old English use of the word tell, it sometimes is telling is in fact counting.
So why is it connected?
And by the way, what is another way to tell somebody the story of what happened to you? To recount, or to give an accounting of what happened.
So why? What's the connection?
I don't know.
They use the word tally in Greek. You keep score.
That's right. So
tally.
Right.
So What is the connection? I'm not sure I see, but it's interesting.
It's in both
that
languages.
It's definitely in the concept.
Right.
Yeah.
It appears in different languages.
I think it's because the use of numbers. People, I don't think a person by himself or herself
Can tell itself a story.
really needs to keep count of a lot of things. But count and keeping a track of numbers is something that you do together with other people. Because I'm selling you, how many sheep did you want?
Yeah, but how is that connected to narrative and narration?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's interesting.
Well,
I agree, it's interesting.
We number the chapters and the verse.
Right.
No, we don't. We do not.
Of course we do not.
The
No, no.
Christians did it for us.
But we number the
do
aliyot.
not. We do something totally different, and we do sidra and seder because
Right.
we want to keep it in order. But that's a totally different way of looking at
Correct.
texts.
But the tell, count, recount, and the sefer, lisaper,
And sipur
and
mispor.
and misparim, right? And
And let's
mispor.
not go to maspera. So let's leave it at that.
What is maspara?
Cutting hair, never
Oh.
mind.
Because misparaim I know.
Mispor it. Misparayim.
The last
Never.
part.
Don't. Let's not go there.
Actually, to cut, well, katav originally meant to cut also, to describe. But
I knew I
cutting,
shouldn't mention it.
I think cutting, that Sefer or Sipur has a relationship to cutting.
Okay.
Maybe.
So Ezra was סופר מהיר בתורת משה. I think it's a beautiful
Good.
expression. סופר מהיר בתורת משה.
ויעלו מבני ישראל מן הכהנים והלווים והמשוררים והשוערים והנתינים אל ירושלים בשנת 7 לארתחשסתא, which sounds like a soda. המלך.
What flavor?
Artik.
What
Artik
flavor
Shasta.
king do you want?
I have no idea what that verse is doing. Oh, except it's
Instead
only
of
when.
counting
It's not
all
Sheva. Sorry.
Instead of listing all the names of the clans and the Rashei Av, here it just names the categories of different
Correct.
people.
And but says when they came up.
Yeah.
7th year. And by the way, in terms of dating, there's a question here as to which Artaxerxes or Artaxerxes we're talking about. All right, verse 8.
Shall we read it in English?
Oh.
Let's read the.
Okay, why don't you read it in English, Bill? Sorry.
Some of the Israelites, the priests and the Levites, the singers, the gatekeepers, and the temple servants set out for Jerusalem in the 7th year of King Artaxerxes, arriving in Jerusalem in the 5th month in the 7th year of the king. Close parallel.
Yeah, why is it in parentheses
It's not in Hebrew, and let's leave the
CPS out
the
there. Okay.
weird way of some of the translations out of it. I mean, now we're going to talk about the vowelling, the punctuations too. It's
Okay.
not- Hebrew doesn't have parentheses in the biblical text.
Not true.
Parentheses?
Oh yes, upside down nuns.
In one place.
Oh. So it has parent. Okay.
It's either in Vayibin Zoharon, Vayomer Moshe, or it's in Vayenusu Mipanecha. No, that's the text.
Okay.
It's in Leviticus Numbers. It's in Numbers.
Okay.
And it's got the nun, and it's got the upside down, the inverted nun.
Okay.
Anyway, Nishtahi, Nishtahir.
You gonna go on, Bill?
On the first day of the first month of the journey up from Babylon was started, and on the first day of the 5th month he arrived in Jerusalem, thanks to the benevolent care of his God for him. For Ezra had dedicated himself to studying the teaching of the Lord, so as to observe it and to teach the laws and rules to Israel.
I'm
So
sorry, but this translation is really killing the text. I mean, seriously, most times it's just pet peeves. Today, I mean, in this particular passage, it is totally killing the text.
I agree.
JPS is really...
So, one of the things, however we would choose to translate it, so the Hechin there is also interesting. But we have, again, this fascinating...
I mean, there's so many allusions here. Hechin levavo, lidrosh.
So the
prepare
Lid-
himself.
the Lidrosh we also have at the end of chapter 6, and we talked about last week. At the end of chapter 6, they translate Lidrosh to worship. I have no idea the grounding for it, right? It's in 621. Just a fascinating oddity of language, oddity of translation. 621.
So this
There
is
is no 621.
so they're translating.
There is in my book, page 1848.
621. Why am I missing it?
621.
I don't have 21 and 6.
Find chapter 7. It's right before.
Yeah,
It's 2 verses before the beginning of chapter 7.
well, but you missed the part that says they slaughtered the Passover offering.
No, we did all that last week.
Yeah, I mean the context definitely looks different than what he's preparing to do in chapter 7.
And here he says.
לדרוש את תורת אדוני ולעשות וללמד בישראל חוק ומשפט. I mean, not only he's studying it for himself, but he's preparing himself to teach, which is a different lidrosh, I guess.
Maybe. No,
I don't know. I mean, I suggest.
But whatever it is, it's it's a verb that bridges what we've seen, the sacrifice and the reading of Torah, because it's related in chapter 6. It's a verb that's connected to the sacrifice, whatever it means, and here it's related clearly to a more normative, related to, related to expounding or studying or something. It's also interesting that he does all these things B'Yisrael. Right? So he hechina vavo lidrosh et Torat Adonai v'lasot u'lalamed b'Yisrael chok u'mishpat.
Yeah, there's a sense of a very expanded generalization of the sense of who he is and what his role is now that he's come to live among the people who are there, because he obviously there is a sense, I don't know, maybe because we read the former parts, that he's not coming to a barren place.
Correct.
He's coming to a place that already has inhabitants who are supposed to know, but they lack the leadership of the priest, or at least that's my impression here, that he's coming to finally teach them Torah Moshe.
Correct. And even though he's identified as a priest, there's no statement here as it relates to based on Leviticus, he's not killing animals. Right?
Yeah.
Whether he does or he doesn't. At this moment, our introduction to him started with him as the descendant of Aaron, but here it's all about his own, his graduate program in biblical studies, and then he is the one who brings Chok and Mishpat to the people.
Not a word about Bet HaMikdash.
Right, nothing about it.
That is supposed to have been completed the chapter before. Not a word, not a mention of the temple. Amazing.
Maybe it's coming.
No,
Maybe
but if you have this kind of introduction of really, I can hear the fanfare, I can hear the trumpets
Correct.
announcing his arrival, and he's coming to teach. He's a Sofer Mahir. He knows the Torah.
But he's introduced as Ezra HaKohen.
As Ezra Kohen, and not a word about Bet HaMikdash. Plus, again, it's kind of a side mention. Again, that's why the flattening of this translation is driving me crazy. Look at verses 7 through 9, 7, 8, and 9, before Ki Ezra Echin et Levavo.
Okay.
It sounds to me, it looks to me, like somebody had, and here's the word that I can't say in English, the annals of the king.
The history record.
Yeah, the history, the records, whatever. I never know if I'm saying it correctly. Because of the numbers, because of the very clear of the dates and the number of years of the king, as if somebody lifted it straight from those records and kind of put it together, and then he adds verse 10, which is from a totally different kind of scripture or kind of writing. No?
Yes. Can.
Okay.
And again, the translation flattens it completely because it kind of makes it all uniform. That's why it makes me
It's
crazy.
interesting. I not having a sense of the Hebrew, I can see what you're saying just by looking at the content.
I'm glad.
of 7, 8, and 9.
I'm glad.
And then, but are you saying that there is really a stylistic difference also?
I can see it clearly. I can see it as if it was written in two different fonts, and as if I was looking at the original documents. I can see it.
Right.
Not only is it the numbers, which is the first giveaway, but Keyad Elohav Tova Alav, that is so part of the records of the kings. Keyad Elohav Tova Alav, this formula of as God, what's the translation here? The end of verse 9. The end of verse 9.
Benevolent care of his God for him.
Vakasha. If that's not a signature of the records of the kings of that period, of that time, the Persian, the Babylonian, the Sumerian, when you see those huge writings or whatever, that's a signature. Keyad Elohav Tova Alav, because everything is done with the blessing of their gods. So it's as if it's lifted straight from those records. And then you have Ki Ezra הכין לבבו לדרוש את תורת אדוני ולעשות וללמד בישראל חוק ומשפט. It's such a beautiful Jewish writing all of a sudden.
It's true. Yeah, you know what? That actually is fascinating.
And that's why
The God is called Ezra's God rather than our God or the
think
God.
about it, there isn't that much history writings for Israel as there was for the Persians.
there must have been, but we don't have it. We have records of it being written. ויתר דבריו הלא הם כתובים על ספר תורת, whatever. There is mention in the books of Kings, in both of them, the rest of his events and deeds and great achievement is written in the records of the book of the kings of Judah. And then the records of the kings of the book of Israel, and nobody knows
And
what happened
as
to
it
these
relates-
books, but they were writing.
As it relates to
but
written...
there is no king of Israel at this time.
Right. But as it relates to written record, if we take the Persian Empire as being a time factor, in terms of complete writings, we have quite a bit of ancient Israel writing, even if it's edited in the Persian period. But we have a great bit that we have as written record, however historical, we won't grade the historicity of it, that predates it. More than most, I don't know how many other ancient peoples have an edited, succinct body of literature from the world, pre-6th century, before the Common Era. And when we make the transition, no, the Egyptians don't have a vast literature. They have all sorts of archaeological records, and then we have things like the Amarna documents and other kinds of business records. But we don't have an ancient Egyptian literature other than
Egyptian Book of the Dead.
The Egyptian Book of the Dead.
Yeah, that's because it was a dime a dozen. They were making copies and sticking one in every grave. But the difference is, what the heck did they write on? Because these folks,
they carved it.
They carved it in clay, and they baked clay. This was invented.
They had papyrus.
I'm talking about the Sumerians, the Persians. The Egyptians had papyrus, and papyrus
doesn't keep any better than clay.
It's much worse than
Just
clay.
remember, we have 2,000-year-old documents.
Yes, we have 2,000
that aren't in clay.
We have
but we have 3,000-year-old documents that were copied and copied and copied. But we have actual archaeological 2,000-year-old pieces of paper.
It's
so to
true,
speak.
and that was because they were hidden in some very dry conditions.
Exactly, below sea level.
Very lucky.
But the thing is that if you look at the records of Babylon, the records of Sumeria, and the ancient records of Persia, they all used Sumerian writing, which was clay tablets that they would put these funny little wedge shapes in. That stuff lasts, and particularly if it's in a dry country. At one point, that someone had figured out how to read Akkadian, which is the Babylonian language before Aramaic took over. And they had a whole library of Sumerian, which no one could read, until, I love this part, someone found...
Hi.
Al said he was going to be in here. I was supposed to stick my head in and get him. He's not here.
Al's not in here. I'm confident that Al's not in here.
So,
Was he supposed to be in here?
I have no idea.
Okay.
So
If he told you he was.
someone found, I'm not kidding, an Akkadian Sumerian dictionary. Why? Because it was written in clay and it took up 20 yards of an ancient library bookshelf.
But the point I want to make is we are now in the transition from the Persian Empire forward, from which we will have far more literature that has been maintained up until this day. Right? So if you go pre-Persian, we have very little by way of, we have pieces and snippets. We have the Enum Elish, we have the Epic of Gilgamesh, we have pieces of. But the Bible, or large chunks of the Bible, as an edited, continuous literature from a pre-Persian world, is truly exceptional, with very few parallels. That is material that old. But from the Persian period forward, we have lots more. Because we not only have lots of Persian records, once we get from the Persians into the Greek world, we have an explosion of literature that only increases over time. From the printing press to the movable type printing press to digital media and so forth.
Well, that from the printing press onward, but we lost so much of the stuff that was written on papyrus and on skin. I mean, that stuff rots, and in fact, it burns too. Well, as happened with that library in Alexandria.
I read The Name of the Rose.
What?
The Name of the Rose. Berto Echo's wonderful book.
Yeah, but I mean, I
Well,
just
that's
couldn't
true.
let
A
it
lot of
pass
the
because this
documents
glares
that
at
he
me
has
as such
Correct.
clear.
And it's such a
listing and
weird,
putting it in a different context.
and I'm stuck in terms of if you were going to hang it on one detail, that the Bible, it's one thing if it's quoting, and in a second we're going to quote another letter from Artaxerxes.
Between the Egyptian,
But we're in what in the Talmud we call the Stam. We're in the narrative voice of the Tanakh, and God is called the God of Ezra.
on clay.
No, it's called his God.
We have that.
Different than the God of Abraham.
Because all the Egyptian records for that era are gone. But the Akkadian records that were buried
This
in
is
Egypt,
the stitching.
they're there.
That's the stitch between the texts.
Yes. All right.
They also
All right, let's read at least one more verse, and that may be as far as we get. But that'll set the stage.
Stone, yeah.
Jackie, do you want to read verse 11?
Okay.
We'll work around the English readers today.
The following.
Parshegin. Yeah, you're in the right place. The following.
The following is the text of the letter which King Artaxerxes, gave Ezra the priest scribe, a scholar in matters concerning the commandments of the Lord and his laws to Israel.
Good.
Artaxerxes.
Hold on. Don't start with 12. Again, the frame of it is the narrative voice is somebody who sees themselves as other than Ezra. Right? So that's fascinating. The description, now Ezra is HaKohen HaSofer. The priest, the scribe. And he is Sofer, or I can't do it without a preposition in English, but in the words of the commandments of God and God's laws for Israel.
It translates almost like a teacher of or an instructor of.
Correct. They say scholar, and I would want to make it lisaper, like that he is the teller. The maspir? Well, make up a word. That doesn't sound good, does it?
No, that's making up a word, but it's based on models that exist.
Yeah, I would say the magid, except it's a different verb.
Yeah.
It works better with that verb. Yeah. Well, it's neat, by the way, if we want to extend our kind of verb family that has us fascinated. We've done writing and speaking out loud, and we've done counting, telling, writing, scribbling. And if we want to go there, to teaching, because teaching verbs are related, we did have a little Ahmed up above. From.
It's fascinating how here it's used, in Hebrew it's used twice. I don't know what the translation says. Ezra HaKohen HaSofer, which is his title.
Right, and he is
Sofer
Sofer
Divrei
Divrei.
Mitzvot Adonai
Yeah,
v'chukav al Israel.
Correct. But again, just to be really good, the first one, just even following the English, is the scribe, and the second one is the scholar.
Sofer Divrei Mitzvot Adonai. It's so not a scholar because scholar sounds like somebody so removed from the people.
Right.
And Sofer Divrei Mitzvot Adonai is so transient and so outgoing.
And the same word as scribe,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So, however, you
It's
need to
Mesoper
connect it,
Mitzvot Adonai, no
right?
question
So you
about
need to
it.
be able. You could. So you can't use recount because the first verb is scribe, and you can't really say scribbled or scripted because it's got. I don't know. It's got more of an oratory sense to it. The Sofer Divrei Mitzvot Adonai v'chukav al Yisrael.
I wonder whether, I'm sure that the Levites and the priests, since they largely were excluded from agricultural professions, probably were all of them literate. They had, and they ended up being functionaries both in religious and non-religious.
Right, though I would say it less kind of in the negative because they weren't farmers, and more because of the nature of what they had to do. They had to be much more of a class of people who studied and taught, right? And therefore, being able to written language, literacy was much more important than kind of the folk wisdom of farmers.
Well, I think that as a result, they formed a technocratic class for an emerging civilization.
One could even say an educated guild.
Yes.
In some ways, related to the role that Christian priests play in some societies through the Middle Ages.
Yes. And therefore, I wonder whether the word sofer, whether at the time the word sofer had a lot more meanings and a lot more associations than we have with it today, and that even modern Hebrew speakers have. That sofer, I think, is
Author.
Does it mean author?
Sofer
Or
is
is
author.
Sofer.
Sofer is author.
And in a religious
Shalem
context,
is
a sofer. Correct. And if we put it into a religious context,
Sofer
it means
is
sofer
the
stam.
writing, yeah,
It means a
sofer.
scribe, somebody who
Okay.
writes, recopies sacred books. But I agree that and we see this earlier. We see this with Bunny Rabbit, the scribe, with Shaphan, right?
Shaphan is sofer.
Right. We see that and Baruch, right?
Ken Baruch of Yirmiyahu.
From Yirmiyahu. So we have in Shaphan in the story of Josiah, Baruch in the story, that there is a high administrative function, servant to kings and priests and prophets that goes by the title of Sofer, that doesn't seem to be the one who recopies books.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So I wonder whether technocrat might be. It's a little too bland a term.
It sounds awfully, negative into
Yeah.
things.
Maybe he's an authority.
But I would say an administrative authority.
Yeah, and I wonder whether they had shop front sofrim for people that needed letters, that needed deeds.
Yeah, there's a beautiful statue, an Egyptian statue, as a matter of fact, of the scribe sitting in front of the king, sitting on his knees and having the whatever scribe
Quill, this quill.
With his,
Yeah.
on his lap.
Yeah.
Paints and stuff.
There's among all the sofer biblically, there's a beautiful verse in Tehillim, in Psalms, which is using it metaphorically, but it's so beautiful. I want to read it to you people, if you don't mind. Psalms 45, if you're interested. Psalm 45, verse 2, and again, the JPS. What happened to it now? Disappeared. Oops. Oh, here it is. Tehillim and if you have a different translation, that's probably better. Rachash libi davar tov. My heart overflows with goodly theme. Rachash libi davar tov. Omer ani ma'asai lemelech. I address my verses to the king. It's lemelech, it's to a king, meaning my things are suitable to be heard in front of a king and not I'm talking to the king. My words are so fantastic or so beautiful that they fit to be yeah,
the kingly class.
Lemelech, a kingly, yeah, my verses, my words, whatever. Leshoni et sofer mahir. Isn't it beautiful? My tongue is like a fast or a skilled or a very talented scribe. I don't have to write it, but my words, not everybody can be a sofer. My tongue is like a good sofer, somebody who comes up with a good word. What's your translation here?
My works are for a king, my tongue is like the pen of a skillful scribe.
My words are for a king. There's something about it which the sofer becomes a metaphor for somebody who's really skillful, because everybody can understand maybe if you talk to him, but not everybody can come up with these words.
Wow, there's got to be
There's got
to be a ton of Zohar stuff on this,
Sure.
in terms of the use of noises in the whole verse. Did you read the introductory verse to that psalm?
Keep going.
Lamnatseach al shoshanim v'nekoach maskil shir yedidot.
No, you skipped verse 2. My heart is a sphere with gracious words.